Chloe, where's your vehicle? Grandpa Arthur's voice sliced through the birthday chatter like ice. The entire dining room went silent. 23 pairs of eyes snapped to me, then to the Uber pulling away from the curb outside his sprawling estate. My fingers clenched around the first edition Hemingway I'd spent 3 months' savings to buy him. The air felt suddenly thick, suffocating. Mom, Eleanor, glided forward, her champagne glass sparkling under the chandelier. Oh, Dad, Bridget needed reliable transportation for the twins. You know how children require safety. Across the room, my younger sister, Bridget, smiled blandly, nestled beside her husband, David. She was wearing the diamond bracelet I'd admired just last Christmas, the one I'd casually mentioned during our shopping trip, which then appeared on her wrist 3 days later. Grandpa Arthur's weathered face hardened in a way I'd never seen. His jaw set like concrete. It was his 79th birthday, and this was clearly not the celebration he'd envisioned. Beatrice, his tone could have frozen lava. Are you telling me you allowed Chloe to surrender the Range Rover we specifically purchased for her birthday? The one with the safety features I researched for 6 weeks? Well, I didn't exactly, Eleanor began, stumbling. Chloe needed it more because she has children, Grandpa interrupted, his voice dropping to a register that made everyone lean forward, captivated. Is that the statement you're making? I wanted to vanish. This wasn't how I'd imagined him finding out. Bridget floated over, her hand on David's arm. Grandpa, honestly, Chloe was so generous about it. She practically insisted. And with Lily and Ethan needing to get to different schools and activities, the logistics were becoming impossible. The lie landed so naturally, I almost believed it myself. Almost. 3 months ago, I'd come home from my architectural firm to an empty driveway. That evening, Eleanor called, not to ask, but to inform me she'd transferred the title to Bridget. Family sacrifices for family, she'd said, as if that explained stealing my car. When I'd mentioned needing the vehicle for work, hauling design materials, Mom suggested I adjust my schedule around public transportation. When I reminded her the Range Rover was a gift to me, she'd laughed. Don't be selfish. Your sister has 2 children. Grandpa Arthur turned to me. His eyes, usually warm as summer afternoons, now held something sharp, assessing. Chloe, did you volunteer your vehicle? The room held its breath. I choked on my words. Years of being told to keep the peace, to be the bigger person, to understand that Bridget needed more support, it all weighed down my tongue. Answer me honestly, Grandpa Arthur pressed. No, sir. I didn't. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Eleanor's face flushed crimson. Chloe, how dare you embarrass your sister like this in front of the entire family? Eleanor, be quiet. Grandpa Arthur's command was soft but absolute. Chloe, explain what happened. So, I did. The whole story tumbled out. How I'd returned to an empty driveway. How the title had been transferred without my signature, Mom had my old passport information and forged the documents. How I'd been using rideshares for 3 months, watching Bridget, my temporary gift fairy, heading to yoga classes and brunch dates. When I finished, Grandpa Arthur nodded slowly. Then he turned to my grandmother, Beatrice, who'd been watching from her armchair with an expression I couldn't decipher. Beatrice, would you bring me the Miller file from my study? Top drawer, left side. Grandma stood immediately, moving with a certainty that suggested she'd been expecting this request. Bridget laughed nervously. Grandpa, this is ridiculous. It's just a car. Chloe doesn't even need it. She lives near the metro. The metro that adds 90 minutes to her commute each way. Grandpa Arthur's eyebrow arched. The metro that forced her to decline the Morrison project because she couldn't transport materials. My stomach dropped. How did he know about Morrison? Beatrice returned with a leather folder. Grandpa Arthur opened it, scanned a page, then looked at Eleanor with the expression usually reserved for business adversaries. "Eleanor, I'm curious about something." The Range Rover was titled in Chloe's name exclusively. "How did you execute a title transfer?" Eleanor's confidence wavered. "I had her identification information from when I helped her renew her passport." "So, you committed fraud?" Grandpa Arthur's words landed like anvils. "I'm her mother. I made a family decision." "You made a theft decision." Grandpa Arthur closed the folder. "The vehicle was Chloe's property. You stole it, forged documents to transfer ownership, and then gaslit her into believing she was selfish for objecting." David finally spoke up. "With respect, sir, families should support each other. Bridget has children who require, David. Unless you'd like me to discuss why your consulting business has received $50,000 in loans from Eleanor over the past year, I suggest silence." The color drained from David's face. $50,000? I looked at Eleanor, whose embarrassment had morphed into something closer to panic. "Dad, that's private financial. Nothing is private when you're stealing from one daughter to subsidize another's lifestyle." Grandpa Arthur opened the folder again. "Did you think I wouldn't notice? Beatrice and I have been watching this pattern for 18 months. 18 months. My mind raced backward. The laptop that broke right before Bridget needed one for her online boutique. The security deposit I'd loaned Mom that somehow became Bridget's down payment for a leased BMW. The bridesmaid dress I'd purchased for Bridget's second wedding that cost more than my rent. This has been planned," I whispered. Grandma Beatrice nodded. "We suspected, but we needed confirmation." Grandpa Arthur stood, and despite his 78 years, he commanded the room effortlessly. "Here's what's going to happen. First, Bridget will return the Range Rover to Chloe immediately, with a signed apology acknowledging the vehicle was taken without permission. But the twins," Bridget started. "The twins can ride in the BMW David leased last month. The one I've seen in your driveway." Grandpa Arthur didn't even glance at her. "Second, Eleanor, you will repay Chloe for every expense she's incurred in the past 18 months due to your redistribution of her resources. I have a comprehensive list." He withdrew several pages from the folder. My jaw dropped. I recognized my own handwriting, the budget spreadsheets I'd created to track expenses, the ones I'd left at their house months ago and assumed were discarded. "Grandma?" I looked at Beatrice in shock. She smiled gently. "I photographed them. You've always been meticulous." The spreadsheets detailed everything: $12,000 in loans never repaid, $8,500 in shared expenses that only benefited Bridget, $3,200 in gifts I'd been guilted into providing. The total was staggering. $23,700. "Eleanor," Grandpa Arthur continued, "you have 60 days to repay that amount to Chloe, or I will recoup it from your inheritance advancement." Mom went pale. "My what? Did you think the trust fund we established for you was unconditional? There are clauses regarding financial mistreatment of family members. You violated them spectacularly." Grandpa Arthur's expression could have cut diamonds. "Beatrice and I have been funding your lifestyle for decades under the assumption you treat your daughters equitably. We were wrong." He turned to me. "Chloe, I apologize. We should have intervened sooner, but we needed absolute proof of the pattern. Grandma Beatrice has been documenting everything for months." The room spun slightly. All those times Grandma had asked about my job, my commute, my finances. She hadn't been making conversation. She'd been building a case. Bridget's face had transformed from smugness to genuine panic. "Grandpa, please. We can't afford to give back the car. We need it." Then perhaps David should focus on building his consulting business instead of accepting handouts. Grandpa Arthur's gaze could have melted steel. Or perhaps you should sell the designer handbags I noticed in your closet during my last visit. The Birkin alone would cover several months of minivan payments. My Aunt Joyce, Eleanor's sister, who'd been silent throughout the entire confrontation, suddenly spoke up. Arthur, I think you're being harsh. Eleanor made mistakes, but family should. Joyce, you're the last person who should speak about family obligations. Grandpa Arthur swiveled toward her. Should I mention the $15,000 you borrowed from Eleanor last year? The loan that was actually meant for Chloe's graduate school fund. Aunt Joyce's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. My graduate school fund. The one Eleanor said had been mismanaged by the bank. The fund I'd assumed was lost to bad investments. There never was a bank error, was there? I asked quietly. Grandpa Arthur shook his head. Joyce needed money for her vacation property. Eleanor raided your education fund without permission from the trust administrators. We discovered it during the annual audit. The betrayal crashed over me in waves. Not just Eleanor and Bridget, but Aunt Joyce, too. How many family members had been complicit? Dad, Andrew, who'd been standing by the window throughout this entire revelation, finally turned around. His face was gray. Chloe, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the education fund, but you knew about the car, I said. His silence confirmed it. Grandpa Arthur nodded as if this answered something. Andrew, you have 30 days to move your belongings from Eleanor's house. Beatrice and I are purchasing a condo for you downtown. The papers are already prepared. What? Eleanor shrieked. You can't just, Eleanor, your husband has been sleeping in the guest room for 2 years because you've made his life miserable. He stays because he's afraid of losing access to his daughters. That ends today. Grandpa Arthur's voice softened as he addressed Dad. Andrew, the condo is yours. No strings attached. You deserve better than being an accessory to theft and manipulation. Dad's eyes welled up. Arthur, I don't know what to say. Say you'll have dinner with us weekly so we can rebuild what Eleanor destroyed, Grandma Beatrice interjected gently. And perhaps bring Chloe. We've missed you both. The implication was clear. Bridget wasn't included in that invitation. David tried to salvage the situation. Mr. Sanderson, I think there's been a misunderstanding. When Eleanor transferred the vehicle, she told us Chloe had agreed. Did you ask Chloe directly? Grandpa Arthur interrupted. David's silence was damning. That's what I thought. You didn't question whether stealing from your sister-in-law was appropriate because it benefited you. That's called complicity, David. I watched David's composure crumble. He'd always presented himself as the successful entrepreneur, the man who'd elevated Bridget's status. But standing there under Grandpa Arthur's scrutiny, he looked small. There's more, Grandma Beatrice said, opening another section of the folder. Chloe, do you remember the freelance architectural project you completed last year? The residential redesign for the Miller family? I nodded, confused. Yes, that was a significant commission. Why do you remember your fee? $22,000. I was saving it for my voice died as realization struck. For the down payment on a condo. And where is that money now? Grandma Beatrice's question was gentle but purposeful. My mind raced backward. I'd deposited the check, watched my account balance swell with pride. Then Eleanor had called about Bridget's emergency. Something about Lily and Ethan needing medical procedures. I transferred $15,000 immediately. Promised to send more after my next paycheck. Lily and Ethan never had medical procedures, did they? I asked hollowly. Bridget looked away. The money funded their vacation to Hawaii, Grandpa Arthur said. The trip they posted extensively on social media while you were eating ramen and taking extra freelance work to rebuild your savings. The room started spinning. I remembered those posts. Bridget's sun-soaked photos with captions about a blessed life and family adventures. I'd felt happy for her. Guilty that I couldn't contribute more to the twins' experiences. I'd been happy while she vacationed on my stolen money. How much total? I whispered. How much have they taken? Grandpa Arthur consulted his papers. In the past 3 years, accounting for direct thefts, coerced loans, fraudulent transfers, and money given under false pretenses, approximately $67,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $67,000. More than a year's salary at my firm. That's impossible, I breathed. It's meticulously documented, Grandma Beatrice assured me. Every transaction, every lie, every manipulation. We have bank statements, text messages, and witness testimony from family members who felt uncomfortable but remained silent. She gestured around the room, and several relatives wouldn't meet my eyes. Uncle Michael cleared his throat. Chloe, I'm ashamed to say I borrowed $5,000 from you 2 Christmases ago. Eleanor told me you were flushed with cash and happy to help family. I had no idea I was living paycheck to paycheck, I finished bitterly. That I'd given up vacations, delayed dental work, and turned down social invitations because I had no disposable income. Uncle Michael's face flushed with shame. I'll pay you back with interest, I swear. Several family members will be making restitution, Grandpa Arthur confirmed. We've already had conversations. Everyone who knowingly or unknowingly benefited from Eleanor's redistribution scheme will contribute to making you whole. Eleanor finally exploded. This is insane. I'm her mother. Everything I did was to keep this family balanced. Chloe is capable and strong. She doesn't need coddling like Bridget does. Coddling? Dad's voice cracked through the room like thunder. Everyone turned to stare at him. He'd been quiet so long that his sudden volume was shocking. You call what you did to Bridget coddling, Eleanor? You've destroyed her. You've taught her that manipulation and theft are acceptable. You've ensured she has no life skills, no work ethic, and no moral compass. You didn't help Bridget. You crippled her. Eleanor reeled backward as if he'd struck her. Dad wasn't finished. And Chloe, our strong, capable Chloe, do you know what her therapist told me last month? Ice water filled my veins. Dad, don't. She has anxiety attacks in parking lots, Dad continued, his voice breaking. She has nightmares about being homeless. She's terrified to spend money on basic necessities because you've conditioned her to believe she's selfish for having needs. Our daughter requires medication because you've psychologically tormented her for years, and I let it happen because I was too afraid to stand up to you. The silence that followed was absolute. I'd never told Dad about therapy. Never mentioned the panic attacks or the Lexapro prescription, but apparently, he'd noticed more than I'd realized. Andrew, Eleanor's voice was small now. Uncertain. I'm done, Eleanor. Completely done. Dad walked across the room and stood beside me. I should have protected both our daughters. Instead, I protected no one. But that ends now. Bridget was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. This isn't fair. I have children. I need support. Then support yourself, Grandpa Arthur said without sympathy. Your children are 9 and 6 years old, both in school full-time. You're perfectly capable of employment. David is perfectly capable of earning money. Honestly, you've been coasting on your sister's sacrifices and your mother's enabling. That ends immediately. Aunt Joyce, who tried to slip toward the exit, froze when Grandpa Arthur's gaze landed on her. Joyce, stay. We're not finished with you. She turned slowly, her face ashen. The vacation property you purchased last year, Grandpa Arthur said conversationally. The one in Santa Fe. Lovely mountain views, I'm told. What did that cost? Around $300,000, Aunt Joyce's lips pressed into a thin line. I don't see how that's relevant. It's relevant because you told Eleanor you needed $15,000 for emergency medical expenses. Multiple sclerosis treatment, wasn't it? Grandpa Arthur's expression could have frozen hell. Except you don't have MS, do you, Joyce? You have a vacation home you wanted to furnish. The gasps around the room were audible. You used my daughter's education fund to buy furniture? Dad's voice was deadly quiet. Aunt Joyce's hands trembled. I was going to pay it back. With what money? Grandma Beatrice challenged. You're 62, retired early, living on a fixed income. You have no means to repay $15,000, which means you committed fraud, knowing you'd never face consequences. I felt numb. Aunt Joyce had visited me in the hospital when I'd had appendicitis. She brought flowers and sat with me for hours. She called me her favorite niece and told me I could always count on family. All while she'd robbed my future. Here's what will happen, Grandpa Arthur said, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Joyce, you will sell the Santa Fe property. You purchased it outright using stolen funds, so every penny from that sale will go to Chloe. Additionally, you will be removed from all family trusts and inheritance considerations. Your betrayal extends beyond theft. You manufactured a terminal illness to manipulate your sister. That's unforgivable. Arthur, please. Aunt Joyce's voice cracked. Leave my home now. Aunt Joyce looked at Eleanor, desperate for support. But Eleanor had shrunk into herself, no longer the commanding matriarch, but a woman watching her world collapse. Aunt Joyce left without another word. The relatives remaining in the room shifted uncomfortably. I could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. Who else had benefited from Eleanor's schemes? Who else might face Grandpa Arthur's accounting? Cousin Sarah approached me hesitantly. Chloe, I didn't borrow money, but I need to apologize anyway. Last Thanksgiving, Aunt Eleanor told me you couldn't make it because you were too busy with work. But you weren't invited at all, were you? I shook my head slowly. I'd spent that Thanksgiving alone in my apartment, believing Mom when she'd said the family gathering was cancelled due to Grandma Beatrice's cold. I'm so sorry, Sarah whispered. I should have called you directly. I should have questioned why you'd miss family time. Other cousins began sharing similar stories. A birthday party I'd allegedly declined. A summer barbecue I'd supposedly been too tired to attend. Christmas Eve dinner where Eleanor claimed I'd chosen to work late. I hadn't been invited to any of them. She isolated you, Grandma Beatrice said softly. Classic manipulative behavior. She cut you off from your family support system so you'd have nowhere to turn when you needed help. The methodical cruelty of it staggered me. This wasn't impulsive favoritism. This was calculated psychological warfare. Why? The word burst from me. Why would she do this? Grandpa Arthur and Grandma Beatrice exchanged a long look. Finally, Grandpa Arthur spoke. Your mother has always struggled with a particular fear. The fear of being surpassed by her children. When you started showing exceptional talent in architecture, when you earned scholarships and accolades, Eleanor felt threatened. That's ridiculous, I protested weakly. Is it? Grandma Beatrice pulled out another document, a newspaper clipping from 15 years ago. This is from your high school graduation. You won the Presidential Scholar Award, the highest academic honor. Do you remember how your mother reacted? I remembered. She'd smiled for photos, but spent the car ride home complaining about the parking situation and how the ceremony ran too long. I'd assumed she was tired. Eleanor called me that night, Grandma continued. She was furious. Said the award made Bridget feel inadequate. Said it wasn't fair that you got recognition when Bridget tried hard, too. She wanted us to minimize your achievement at family gatherings. My chest tightened. Did you? Absolutely not. We were immensely proud, but Eleanor started a pattern that night, diminishing your successes while amplifying Bridget's mediocre efforts. Grandma's eyes were sad. We thought it was temporary jealousy, something she'd overcome. We didn't realize the extent of the problem until about 18 months ago when we started noticing financial irregularities. That's when we began documenting everything. Grandpa Arthur picked up the thread. When you got the Range Rover, Eleanor called it excessive and unfair to Bridget. Never mind that Bridget had received a car at the same age, a BMW that she totaled while texting and driving. Never mind that you'd never asked us for anything, while Bridget had a list of demands before every birthday. Mom convinced me I didn't deserve the SUV, I said slowly. She said I should be grateful but humble. That flaunting gifts was tacky. While Bridget posted photos of every gift she ever received, Dad added bitterly. Eleanor's double standards were Olympic level. David, who'd been silent during these revelations, suddenly stood. I'm leaving. Bridget, are you coming? Bridget looked between David and the rest of us, clearly torn. For a moment, I thought she might stay, might finally break from the toxic pattern. But she grabbed her purse and followed him to the door. Before leaving, she turned back. Chloe, you always acted like you were better than me, more responsible, more talented, more everything. Maybe Mom went too far, but you never tried to understand how hard it was being compared to you constantly. The accusation hung in the air. I never asked to be compared to you, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. I never wanted competition. I wanted a sister. Bridget's face crumpled, but she didn't respond. She simply left, David's hand on her back, guiding her out of accountability and toward continued delusion. The door closed behind them with a decisive click. She'll be back, Grandpa Arthur predicted. When the money runs out and reality hits, she'll be back. Whether you let her in is entirely your choice. I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to consider that future. Grandma Beatrice stood and addressed the remaining family members. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Comfort in the face of mistreatment is cowardice. If you see family members being mistreated and you say nothing, you're part of the problem. Several heads nodded. Some people looked ashamed. Others looked relieved, as though they'd been waiting years for someone to speak this truth. Now, Grandma continued, her tone warming slightly. Those of you who genuinely care about making amends and rebuilding trust with Chloe, stay. We're going to have cake and celebrate Arthur's birthday properly. Those who can't muster authentic support, there's the door. A few relatives left quickly, unable or unwilling to face the accountability, but most stayed. Uncle Michael approached with his wife, Susan. Chloe, I meant what I said earlier. I'll repay what I borrowed, and I'd like to take you to lunch sometime. Get to know my niece without Eleanor's filter. Cousin Sarah hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry. You deserve better from all of us. One by one, family members approached, some with apologies, some with promises, all with varying degrees of sincerity. I accepted what felt genuine and mentally filed away what felt performative. Dad stayed beside me the entire time, a protective presence I'd never experienced before. When I swayed slightly, overwhelmed, he guided me to a chair and brought me water. Thank you, I whispered. I'm 20 years too late, he replied gruffly. But I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. I squeezed his hand. Deal. Grandpa Arthur produced the birthday cake, an elaborate chocolate creation that suddenly seemed absurd given everything that had transpired. But Grandma Beatrice insisted on normalcy, on reclaiming the celebration from Eleanor's chaos. As we sang Happy Birthday and Grandpa Arthur blew out his candles, I caught him watching me with an expression of fierce protectiveness. What did you wish for? I asked later when things had quieted down. He smiled. That my granddaughter would finally understand her worth. Seems like that wish is already coming true. He turned back to me. Chloe, there's one more thing in this folder. He withdrew a check and handed it to me. I looked at the amount and felt my knees buckle. $235,000. That's what remains of the graduate school fund after Joyce's theft, Grandpa Arthur explained. The original amount was $250,000. With interest over the years, it should have been closer to $280,000, but after Eleanor's unauthorized withdrawal, this is what's left. It's being released to you now directly, with no possibility of Eleanor intercepting it. Use it for your master's degree in architecture. Use it for a down payment on a home. Use it for whatever you want. It's yours. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Additionally, Grandma Beatrice added, we're establishing a direct relationship with you moving forward. No more information filtered through Eleanor. You'll have our phone numbers, our email addresses, and a standing invitation to Sunday dinners. Just you and your father. Eleanor found her voice again. You're cutting me off from my own parents. Over a car? Over systematic financial mistreatment, Grandpa Arthur corrected. Over theft, fraud, favoritism, and emotional manipulation. Over destroying your daughter's trust and stealing years of her financial stability. A car is merely the catalyst that brought everything to light. He looked around the room at the assembled relatives, cousins, uncles, aunts who'd witnessed everything. Everyone here is complicit to some degree. Some of you borrowed money meant for Chloe. Some of you watched Eleanor's favoritism and said nothing. Some of you actively encouraged it. The shame on their faces was almost physical. Here's my final statement, Grandpa Arthur continued. Beatrice and I are revising our estate plans. Moving forward, inheritances will be merit-based and contingent on behavior. Those who demonstrate integrity, work ethic, and genuine family values will be rewarded. Those who demonstrate the opposite will find themselves with very different outcomes than they anticipated. Additionally, I'm establishing a separate trust fund specifically for Chloe, $300,000 that will be managed independently to ensure her financial security while she pursues her education and career. This is separate from the graduate school fund and will provide supplemental income as needed. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Bridget grabbed Eleanor's arm. Fix this. Do something. But Eleanor looked broken, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. She'd been so certain of her parents' unconditional support that she'd never considered consequences. Grandpa Arthur walked over to me and placed his hand on my shoulder. Chloe, I'm sorry we didn't see this sooner, but I promise you it stops today. You deserve better than being your family's automatic sacrifice. The tears I'd been holding back finally fell. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming relief. Someone finally saw. Someone finally acted. Thank you, I whispered. Dad crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have been stronger. I should have protected you. We'll figure it out, I told him. As we stood there, Bridget and Eleanor huddled together near the doorway, their alliance suddenly brittle without Grandpa Arthur's financial backing. David looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Aunt Joyce had already slipped out, presumably before Grandpa Arthur could reveal any more of her transgressions. The party was effectively over, but I didn't care. Grandpa Arthur handed me a business card. This is my attorney, Robert Davis. He's expecting your call Monday morning. He'll handle the vehicle title restoration, the repayment plan, enforcement, and any other legal matters that arise. Everything is already prepared. We just needed your confirmation that Eleanor had indeed committed fraud. You've been planning this for months, I said, awed by the thoroughness. We've been preparing for the moment you'd finally speak your truth, Grandma Beatrice corrected. We knew it would come. We just needed to be ready to act decisively. One of my cousins, Sarah, who'd been watching from the periphery, approached hesitantly. "Chloe, I'm sorry. I should have said something when Aunt Eleanor took your laptop. I knew it was wrong." Others began murmuring similar apologies. Not everyone, but enough that I realized the family hadn't been as unified in Eleanor's favoritism as I believed. They'd just been too afraid to challenge her. Moving forward, Grandpa Arthur announced to the room, "This family will operate on principles of equity, honesty, and mutual respect. Anyone uncomfortable with those terms is welcome to limit their involvement." The message was clear. Adapt or face exclusion. As the party dispersed, people leaving in awkward clusters, Grandpa Arthur pulled me aside once more. "There's something else you should know. The Range Rover has a tracker, a standard feature we installed for safety. Would you like to know where it's been for the past 3 months?" I nodded, curiosity overcoming exhaustion. He showed me his phone. The tracking data revealed something astonishing. The SUV had been to a country club, a spa, a luxury shopping district, and various restaurants. But it had never been to Lily's school, not once. Ethan's preschool pickup location appeared a handful of times, but mostly the vehicle served Bridget's social calendar. "Bridget lied about needing it for the children," I said slowly. Comprehensively, Grandpa Arthur confirmed. "Lily and Ethan attend the elementary school 6 blocks from their house. They walk with neighborhood friends most days. Bridget wanted your vehicle for status, not safety." The final piece clicked into place. Everything had been about appearances. Bridget's image as the successful younger sister. Eleanor's role as the matriarch who could redistribute resources at will. The family mythology that I was simply more capable of handling hardship. Why did they think they could get away with this? I asked. Grandpa Arthur's expression turned sad. "Because you're kind, Chloe. Because you've been trained your entire life to accommodate, to yield, to sacrifice. They mistook your kindness for weakness. Your generosity for unlimited tolerance." "But I'm done sacrificing," I said, surprising myself with a new firmness in my voice. "Good." Grandpa Arthur smiled. "It's time you started living for yourself." Dad drove me home that night in his sedan. We didn't talk much, both processing everything. When we arrived at my apartment, he handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Letters," he said. "I wrote you one every year on your birthday, explaining things I was too afraid to say out loud. About how proud I am. About how sorry I am. About how I should have stopped Eleanor long ago." My throat tightened. "Chloe, read them later. But know that I'm done being a coward. I'm done letting the women I love be hurt because I'm afraid of confrontation. Grandpa offered me an escape, and I'm taking it. I hope you can forgive me for not finding it sooner." "I forgive you," I said honestly. "We both got lost, but we're finding our way back." 3 weeks later, Bridget returned the Range Rover. David pulled up in my apartment complex parking lot, left the keys in the cup holder, and drove away in their BMW without a word. The vehicle was clean, fully fueled, and the title was properly restored in my name. Eleanor deposited the first installment of repayment, $10,000. Grandpa Arthur's attorney confirmed she'd signed an agreement for the remaining balance, with monthly payments automatically deducted from her trust fund distributions. Dad moved into his new condo and invited me for dinner. We cooked together, talked honestly, and began building something that resembled a genuine relationship. The Morrison project partner called me back. With reliable transportation restored, I could accept their offer. The project would be my biggest yet, a sustainable community center that could transform my career. Grandma Beatrice and I started meeting for coffee every Saturday morning. She told me stories about her own youth, about learning to stand up to people who saw kindness as vulnerability. "The strongest people," she said during one conversation, "are those who choose kindness even when they've been hurt." But strength also means knowing when to stop giving pieces of yourself away. I framed that wisdom in my mind. For months after Grandpa Arthur's intervention, I ran into Bridget at a grocery store. She looked tired, her designer clothes replaced with practical Target basics. She saw me, hesitated, then approached. "The Birkin sold for $18,000, she said without preamble. "David got a real job. We're managing." "That's good," I replied, meaning it. "I'm sorry," she added quietly. I didn't realize how much I'd taken until it was all gone. "I thought," she trailed off. "I thought you'd always just give me things. I thought that was normal." It wasn't normal. It was exploitation. She flinched but nodded. "Yeah, it was." She paused. "Lily asks about you. She misses her aunt." "My niece." I'd barely seen her since the birthday confrontation. "Tell her I miss her, too," I said carefully. "Tell her when she's older, if she wants to know her aunt without the drama, my door is open." Bridget's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." I didn't invite her back into my life. Some bridges needed to stay burned, but I could acknowledge that she was learning, changing, possibly becoming someone better than the sister who'd stolen from me. Maybe that was enough. I drove home in my Range Rover, the vehicle that had catalyzed everything. As I parked, I thought about how one moment of truth, Grandpa Arthur asking a simple question, had unraveled years of manipulation. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply answer honestly when someone asks, "What happened?" Sometimes the people who love you are just waiting for permission to fight on your behalf. Sometimes saying no is the most powerful form of self-love. I walked into my apartment where Dad was waiting with takeout and design sketches for my Morrison project. Grandpa Arthur and Grandma Beatrice were coming over later to celebrate my graduate school acceptance. The letter had arrived that morning. My phone buzzed. A text from Robert Davis, Grandpa Arthur's attorney. Final repayment received. Eleanor's obligation fulfilled. Congratulations. I smiled. The life I'd been living, the one where I automatically diminished myself to make others comfortable, was over. The life I was building, the one where my worth wasn't determined by how much I could sacrifice, was just beginning. And I was ready. What do you think is the hardest boundary to set with family?